Hi, I hope that you and your family are safe and well. I'm recording this in London, and today I'm in isolation, like you very well may be. Before introducing you to the video with the amazing Leon, I wanted to set some context. We recorded this before any of us had even heard about coronavirus, so you're not going to hear any mention of it in our conversation. However, I've spoken to Leon, and we think this is more relevant now than ever. Leon shares how simple movement that you can do anywhere, anytime, can disrupt the buildup of stress and help us to be more resilient so we can bounce back more quickly. I've also created a video specifically for the coronavirus, which you can watch on our website, which is www.thriving.london/Kita. Take good care of yourself, look after the ones that are close to you, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello, welcome to Keep Your Thrive Alive. I'm Mark Mulligan, and this is the space where I share tips and techniques to boost your mood, your energy, and your well-being. Today, I'm delighted to have Leon Taylor, a really good friend of mine. Leon is an Olympian. He won a silver medal in the men's synchronized 10-meter diving in Athens in 2004. He's a very sought-after performance coach and keynote speaker. His TED Talk has over 1 million views. Leon is also the face and body of Headspace Move, encouraging millions of people worldwide to move more mindfully and live a healthier, happier, and more rested life. Hi, Leon.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah. Leon, I loved your TED Talk, and one of the things you talk about in it was that when you were a kid, you were a bit of a handful and a bit of a problem for your parents. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the story goes that I was, the doctor defined me as a problem child. And my parents didn't know what to do with me. For some reason, when I was born, I wouldn't rest, I wouldn't sleep, and needed constant attention. My parents had to start sleeping in shifts in order to cope with me. I would only sleep if I was being walked around the block in my pushchair or in the car. So you can imagine how tough that was. And there's a lovely picture of my parents on their wedding day, and they look fantastic. And then 2 years later, there's one of the three of us, and they look as though they've aged 20 years. And it's amazing what lack of sleep will do, apparently. So anyway, my parents didn't know what to do with me. They did their very best, and they took me to the family doctor, who assessed me and said, well, you've got a problem child, and if you can't cope, I can sedate him.
Wow.
Yeah, and my dad, both my mum and dad, my dad in particular said, well, no, we're not having that. And the doctor then started to share various other, pharmaceutical interventions which might be, appropriate. The usual labels that we have nowadays were available back then. So problem child it was. And my mum and dad went off and thought, right, well, we're trying another way. And no one else would look after me because I was a nightmare. They tried. And, my aunties, my uncles, friends of the family. And it was down to my parents. And so they decided to take me head on and try and tire me out. And that's when my life of activity started. So before I can remember, I was involved in everything physical. I used to be in the baby bouncer in the doorway, right? Bounce, bounce, bounce. Because my mum would be in the kitchen and I'd be there bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. It'd be fine. You put me in a cot. So they had to find ways of engaging with me. I would climb up and down, the cushions, everything. My dad would push me down. I'd be back up and push me down. He used to take me to the local swimming pool and I'd splash around for hours and hours and hours. Mother and baby gymnastics. From the age of 8 months, which then went into tumble tops, which went into, et cetera, et cetera. And so all these activities started off as physical movement stuff, and then eventually, naturally went into, well, you've run swimming lessons, and now you're in the swimming club, and you're 6, and now you're competing at gymnastics now that you're 6, and here's another sport, diving. Do you want to try that? Yes, and in our end, and that was it. And my parents were able to channel my energy, and as I got older, I was able to communicate. I was slightly easier to manage, but if I wasn't physically active, I was a nightmare.
Wow. And so essentially your parents were using movement as medicine. Now you've done a lot more research into this and have a much deeper understanding and what it is that you've actually found out about the science behind how being physically active can actually help us not alone with our physical well-being but also our mental well-being.
Sure. Yeah, so fascinating things happen biochemically in your brain when you physically move. So what happens is, as soon as you move physically, the brain actually interprets that as a moment of stress. It thinks, because we still, our human nervous system still lives in the caveman era, it thinks, okay, the body is moved, that means that I need to run away from something or fight something. So in order to protect the brain, it releases a protein called BDNF. brain-derived neurotropic factor, which actually has been shown to change the structure of the brain over time. BDNF actually changes the shape of the brain, specifically the hippocampus.
Wow.
It also repairs, as I've mentioned, and protects the brain. At the same time, there's another chemical released when we physically move, which is more commonly known as endorphins. Endorphins, again, are to do with dumbing down the pain associated with running away from that saber-toothed tiger or whatever it is. So what you've got is this chemical change in the brain. It doesn't have to be half an hour of physical movement. It can be just instantaneous. The body goes, oh, right, I need to change here.
Okay.
And so what happens is, just by moving physically, even by just shifting in your seat and changing the rate of your breathing, you're actually starting to change the chemical mix that's happening in your brain. And what that does in the short term is that it instantly changes your state, changes your mood, and disrupts a build-up of what could be stress. So when you're starting to get stressed over the emails, and you're looking at your computer, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and cortisol are starting to raise. All these chemicals are building in your system. If you stay there long enough, you will change the chemical mix and feel stress. If you just sit back and just change, as I'm doing now, in a way, you start to readdress that balance. So you're disrupting the balance. So that's what happens just instantly at that level.
Wow.
Over the long term, if you do physical movement regularly, it actually, as I mentioned, changes the shape of your brain. It improves self-esteem, and it actually reduces the biological response to psychological stress. So you're almost training the body to be more resilient and more robust. There's oodles of research out there showing how physical movement is an intervention to much more serious mental health issues. And we often think about moving physically being fit, and it's about heart disease and diabetes, and that stuff is all very valid too. But actually, the benefits for one's mental health are huge, and we need to do more of it.
And it's fascinating for me hearing you say this, because the stress response itself is actually designed to protect us, isn't it? It's, in terms of our evolution, when that lion presented itself, it was to prime us to respond in the appropriate physical way, whether to fight or to flight. But of course, the way that we live our lives today, we are, not in the same physical risk that we were before, but we're bombarded by other threats. And of course, the problem for most people is that we don't have any respite in between, that we're connected 24/7, and we're getting these challenges all of the time. So even by having these simple strategies of changing your physicality, changing your movement, and if you do it regularly, you're stopping the build-up of the stress, or the negative impact of the build-up of the stress.
Well, look to our language, take a few deep breaths, go for a walk. This stuff is universally known. We just don't do it. If you get stressed, you stay at your desk and you don't move. You take on a physiology of stress and depression and subdued, and you stay there and you think even harder, and your thinking isn't the problem, to our solutions. Thinking is often the cause of our problem. And so if we can get out of our head and into our bodies a little bit more, then we can change our state by moving our physiology, by changing our breath, and we become more resourceful. It doesn't fix the problem. You have to address the problem, but you're in a more resourceful state in order to do that.
Can you tell us about some of the studies that you've uncovered and some of the statistics that you've uncovered? Yeah,
certainly. So I was fascinated to know, is movement alone enough? And does it have, profound effect on, more serious mental health issues? And I found numerous studies, some to quote, only 5 years ago, a study into patients with depression, and they were using movement interventions, and this happened to be meditative movements. They were looking at yoga, Tai Chi and Qigong, and they found that, with this movement intervention, it had massive positive effects and reducing the symptoms of those with depression. A very similar study looking specifically at PTSD found that actually, reduced the severity of the symptoms of PTSD in a high percentage of the patients, so much so that the PTSD, label was no longer valid.
Wow.
It isn't always, and everyone needs to do yoga and meditation, because some disorders can be addressed in a different way. I found it fascinating to see a study, again, around the same period of time, into anxiety disorders. And it wasn't the meditative movements that were most effective there. It was more aerobic exercise that was the intervention. Okay. What they were suggesting is that the physiological response, of anxiety, raised heart rate, sweating and nervous, when the participants experienced those same symptoms through physical exertion, it was actually training their body to endure and to become more resilient to those emotions. So it was making them more resilient. And then there was another similar study into ADHD, which showed that short bouts of exercise, 20-minute sections, reduced the symptoms of ADHD.
Wow.
So, which would have been perfect for me at school, because if I was told by the teacher to stand up and run around for 20 minutes and come back and concentrate, I'd have been able to do it. But I was told to sit still, to be quiet, and to concentrate. The key is that you need to find something that you enjoy doing, because if you enjoy doing it, then you're likely to do it more. It becomes effortless. If you think, right, well, I need to go to the gym, but I hate the gym, well, good luck with that, because your willpower is a muscle, it'll run out and then you won't go. But if you go, well, I love X, Y, Z, walking the dog or get a dog or whatever it is, it can be very, very simple, but it needs to be consistent, as you said. It needs to be regular, and the most important ingredient is enjoying it.
Absolutely. It's like the work of Michelle Segar. She's written that book, No Sweat, about creating a sustainable exercise regime. If you find a way of moving that you enjoy and you love, then you're much more likely to do it. That whole idea of the chimp brain and how it is that if you're enjoying it in the moment, that it's much more likely to be sustainable for you. And it's funny, like when I'm running sessions, I'm always amazed at the things that people come up with. There was one guy in particular, I remember, and the thing that he loved doing was DIY. And so he bought a doer-upper of a house. He would spend like an hour and a half every night working on it.
Brilliant.
And over the space of 18 months, he lost 3 stone in weight and 3 sizes of his belt as well.
Great.
What would be your recommendation to people?
I'd say 2 things, if I may, because there's a short-term and long-term thing here. So my message is move more, right?
Yeah.
So that's the overriding thing. But how do you do that? So the first one is disrupt the build-up of stress by moving. So if you're at your desk, get up, stand up. So become a smoker, but don't smoke, right? Smokers have got it in. So they get up from their desk, they leave the building, they stand up, they go outside and they go, just go and do that, but without the cigarettes, right? That's great, because you're disrupting the pattern of build-up of stress. You're going outside, you're doing all these great things, you're moving physiology, fantastic. If you're stuck inside at your desk, just get up and have a walk around and then sit back down. Just do whatever you can to notice your triggers, notice the build-up. Before you make that call, stand up, have a little bit of a move around, sit down, take a deep breath and make the call, because you'll be in a more resourceful state if you can move yourself out there. And long-term, challenge is to find your movement. Become a DIYer, get off the bus early, go to Zumba. You can do it on your own, share it with others, move, shake, dance, stand on your head. It doesn't matter what you do. It's not about, the traditional going to the gym, running. If you love going to the gym, get to the gym. If you love running, get out there and run. But if for whatever reason you've got barriers or you don't like, then find the thing that you love to do. Imagine that you were 8 years old and you were hyperactive. Just say yes to all the different activities out there and find the one you like. Just try them, get out there and move more.
Leon, huge thanks from the bottom of my heart. This has been incredibly useful. Personally, I've taken a lot from it, and I know that everybody else watching it will find it incredibly useful as well. For those of you watching, I'd like to highly recommend that you check out Leon's website, which is www.leontaylor.co.uk. And then finally, if you get a chance, check out his TEDx talk, which is absolutely awesome. I hope this has been useful for you, and I'll be back next month with some more tips and techniques as part of Keep Your Thrive Alive. And in the meantime, be well and thrive.